Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of Elevate, an online learning platform for fundraising event professionals. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristen Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fundraising Elevator. We're here to talk event design today because fall event season is in full swing. And if it's not happening for you yet, maybe you should check the calendar because either your fall event's happening or you should be well underway for spring. These next few episodes of the podcast are really designed to give you tools you can apply right now to your events so that you can get tactical, get in there, make some shifts that you're going to see large impact from. Today, we are talking about event design and the environments you create at your event and how those support your mission and the mission of your event. We are talking today to an event designer that we have known for over 20 years. None of us are aged by that at all, I promise.
Maybe longer.
Kurt Beadell of Vibrant Table. Kurt, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
So, Kurt, you and I know each other from the world of how are we designing menus and catering, and over time, your world has evolved into the event design world. And that is where my experience with you has made the biggest impact. Yes. I think back to events that we have done around social justice issues, around equity issues, where what we're trying to pull into the event is an emotional feeling. And that's really hard to accomplish if all we're thinking about are steak and roses, right? It's that bigger idea of how do we pull that emotion all the way through and create an experience or immerse people in it. So I wanted to talk to you today about design choices. You've made my life so much easier with so many events when you've come in and seen like the opportunity or the thing that could make a difference. Sometimes it's flow, sometimes it's audience experience, sometimes it's the specifics of the design, the colors, all the choices. So you're the creative director of Vibrant Table, and Vibrant Table is an event production company that lives in the world of catering in venues and in event design. And I wanted to just like big picture ask you, when you're thinking about just diving into a gala, which you do a ton of fundraising nonprofit events, you're diving into a gala, where do you start? What is the most important thing about creating and designing an event for a really great guest experience?
Such a hard question because it comes from different angles.
Yeah.
But I think that the biggest thing is like being able to like look at the room and look at the space and understanding the space. If you've got 24-foot ceilings, you've got to work with 24-foot ceilings. Ignoring them is not going to help you. Also, the point that you said about that we were talking earlier about the 6-foot level, like walking into a room and everything's moot under 6 feet.
Yeah.
That's only in a group of 500 people that are packed into a room that accommodates 450. In a smaller space, you definitely want to look at the lower level of like the entire space, head to ceiling. But when you get into those big rooms, really understanding the space is crucial. So hand in hand, the floor plan, because how the room moves and how the people move within the room is huge.
Yeah.
And then seeing the space and what the space looks like. I don't think you can do one without the other. I can't do one without the other.
Yeah.
I can't decide on what the color should be without knowing how it lands or what it looks like.
Yeah, when I'm diving into like the strategy of the event, so often I'm starting with the budget, and some people just like can't see the story and the numbers. And I'm like, I get that. Like sometimes you need the narrative. I feel that way about event design. Like I can't even start to conceive what the event's going to feel like and look like and the experience is going to be if I don't understand the floor plan. It's like I have to start with, it's almost like the sandbox, right? Like the structure you're building within.
Yeah.
Well, I think event design, especially your event design in particular, is experiential. And in the world of creating a great event, we're often asked, like, what is it that creates a great event? And I think, the 3 C's are a common refrain that come to mind of like great content, community, the ability to connect to the people that are there and be a part of something, and then the celebration. And so much of your design work really brings the celebration, but with purpose. Can you talk a little bit about when you're talking to a client and you're approaching an event, what's your approach? What's the first thing you want to know when you're in conversation with a client?
What is the purpose of the event? What are you trying to accomplish?
Notice we're all going to ask you that question because that's why we're all there. And that's
Yeah,
why
all
they
of
should be
us
there.
should
That's
be.
what they should all be planning toward.
It
But
is.
It gets missed.
It is. And it's different for every aspect. If it's a corporate event, the person who's hiring you wants it off their plate and they want their boss to be happy.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
If it's a social event, they just want the celebration. They want joy.
Yeah.
If it's a nonprofit event, it's a couple of different things. It's connection,
Yeah.
message to what they're trying to say to the audience, and raising the goal of the amount of money that they're trying to make. So it's a combination. But you have to ask that, and you have to, a lot of times you will be surprised at how many nonprofits don't know the answer to that
Absolutely.
question.
Yep.
Oh, no.
It's like-
20 years, I approached it from two perspectives. We want 500 people in the room and we want to raise $500,000. I mean, I literally would start the planning from the numbers. And only in the past 5 years have we really started to look at, but what's possible when we bring 500 people together? What is how are we going to support your mission and move it forward? What transformation can happen when people feel a part of your organization? And that completely changed the conversation.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you get into budget.
Right.
I mean, don't let the budget idea sit out there for a long time, because eventually it is going to be a huge
It's
factor.
what's real.
It is what's real, and it is what's going to push you. But also that, knowing that budget, then after you've got the conceptual idea, you can feed it to the person. They can visually see it in their mind, because they probably are not a creative in the first place.
Right.
So until you start feeding them the ideas, then you can go, well, this is the best way to spend the money. So then it really comes down to where do I get the biggest bang for my buck?
Yeah.
You come from an interesting place to some of this because you attend a lot of nonprofit galas. You're a donor, as well as working on the event planning design side of things and the two sides of that coin. How did those inform each other for you? How did those come together?
He always knows when an event is poorly planned.
So true. Wait, say it one more time.
Well, I'm wondering if you're guesting and you slipping in and out of between being a guest and a planner, how those inform each other and what you bring to both sides of those, knowing what you know of the other side.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think sometimes our nonprofit friends don't necessarily think that all of those things are impacting guests
Oh, no.
in the room, right?
No, it's very impactful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's overall, think about the 5 senses. It's you have to think about the 5 senses every time you start thinking about how you're going to plan an event. Because if you're going to something, you're experiencing it visually, audibly. Thank you. Audibly. The smell, the feel. It's interesting. A friend of mine said something about going to this specific hotel, and he was like, I go to this same hotel in a different city every single week. Yeah. So your first visual experience is oh my God, do I have to go to this event at this hotel? And you already know what the food is going to taste like. Mm-hmm. So there's no gasp.
Yeah.
There's no wow. It's oh, I've seen that chandelier, that very commercial chandelier in the ceiling of that space 8,000 times. And I don't want to, it's hard to get a wow factor when you're working from that perspective.
Yeah.
That answers the question.
Yeah. I think we don't always think of guests in a 360-degree way as full 3D
what they're
folks walking into an experience. I think even just talking about events as experiences versus functions, it's a very different way to think about them. And I think my experience is that you bring the guest perspective to how you're designing. Yes, we can design within budget. Yes, we can design to 24-foot ceilings, but also you innately understand, walking into this room I've walked into 1,000 times, how can I make that pop for a guest in a different way?
Elevate it.
Yeah. Bring it up. Bring that. We're all headed up, Kurt. We're all headed up.
Yeah.
You did this just the other day. You and I were working on a floor plan, and the conversation of what if we didn't have round tables, but we had long tables was a big discussion for the committee about how do we create a different experience than other galas or other hotel ballrooms, right? And one of the things that you noted immediately in looking at the floor plan was it would, as a guest, it would be an experience that you would hate because the back of half of our audience was facing the stage. And you're like, it's going to impede my dining experience, my socializing experience. So I think you bring guesting into your design work a lot. That so often our nonprofits are in the world of fundraising and fundraising strategy and donor relations. They're not necessarily in the event world. And I think what you bring to the table so often is that you live and breathe the work. You're in the event world all the time. So when an organization is reaching out to engage you, what's the biggest, like, what are the tools you bring to the conversation that maybe they don't have already?
The tools that I bring to the conversation that they don't have already. I just think it's perspective.
Yeah.
It's like the big picture of how an event actually works and functions, how guest experience happens within the space, what your goal is. Even as much as I don't say I'm going to do this, I always stick my finger in the pot and go, no, that's way too long. No.
No one wants a 5-hour program.
No, it's 2.5 hours. You have to ask for the money at 2.5 hours or the money starts going down. And it's all of that. It's 25 years of doing these events and going to these events and like going, the room's too dark.
Yeah.
I can't see the food. Why is there no menu card? Oh my God, it's so loud in here. It's like, do we have to turn the lights up that high? The music's horrible. The sound is horrible. It's like, no one greeted me. Right? The number one thing. Why is no one greeting? There should be a greeter at every single event. Thank you for coming to this event.
Yeah.
It's the simplest thing. It's just one volunteer.
That is psychological safety. We talk about the sort of impact of staging. Like, how do you create an experience that's easy for people to participate in? Because I think so often we're in the like, I have this vision and we're going to do all these things, but we forget how to bring the guest into it. And if they can't find a parking space, if they can't find the location, like the worst to me are when you're in big like hotels and casinos and getting to the ballroom is hard to find. Convention centers, by the time they get to the ballroom, they're already mad, that we've brought them in poorly. But the greeting, the directional signage, the traffic flow, I have to stand in a line to get into another line, and now there's a congestion point and I can't get actually into the door of the room. Like, all of those things to me are what creates a sense of ease to participate. If we've designed it well, I mean, you do all the time. You like grab my bar on the room layout and you go, not there, here, and you move it all the way to the back of the room, because you're like, if the bar is anywhere near the front, we're not moving people all the way into the room. And that sense of your expertise being able to sit at the table with a committee where you have a lot of opinions of folks that attend events, and with the development team, and say, what are we trying to achieve? Not just, we tease all the time in the nonprofit sector about like the color of napkins being the central conversation for committees. It's like,
quit using the C word.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're hard.
They're hard.
Yeah.
Committees are hard.
Well, and I think sometimes you cut through that because you have clarity and understanding and experience.
You have to own it.
Yeah.
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 You have to own it. Walk in with that feeling of like, I've got this. I'm going to tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
You can listen or you don't have to. And I think for me, it's even harder to just like go, okay, no one's going to listen. I'm going to walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the idea of perspective is critical, because I think often in planning, when we're working with folks, they're only thinking about people when they are in a seat eating, watching the program. And that is only one moment of their experience of the design of that event. And you're asking them to blow that out, to think about, okay, what have you told them prior to them getting in their car or in the lift or on the bus to come to this event? Like, what information is out there? What does that design look like? What does that messaging look like? And then how do we create
how do they get
an
greeted?
experience that's congruent with that, and greeting and music and light? Because
here's a drink.
Yeah, I think often those become the afterthoughts, but we all know, make it Maslow's hierarchy or the psychological safety or all those things, those impact how that donor in a seat is judging your program, is judging your stories, is judging their donation. If you haven't created an atmosphere that they're a part of, that doesn't have road bumps, right?
Call on me. There is a sense of laziness that the guest looks at those people that are producing this event and it's the easiest thing to do is like, is that the best they could do?
Yeah.
It's like, that wasn't that great of an event.
Yeah.
It's harder and harder and harder as the years go by to create an impactful, clear message, beautiful, stunning, gasping event where something happens and the people walk away and go, that was a cool experience.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen very often, but it's very easy for the guest to go.
Yeah.
And honestly,
that happens more often.
I don't think you can do that anymore. I don't think that's an experience after COVID.
Yeah.
Where we can still go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It has to matter. I think sometimes when we use the word beautiful or gasp in terms of event design, people automatically think, dear God, what does that do to my budget? Can you talk a little bit about how big impact that yields beautiful rooms and experiences and those moments of gasps? Where should people focus their budget to make big impact?
Number one, black room, light.
So can you say more about that? We've been talking about that, but can you kind of make that?
Visually start with the room being completely black. And the most impactful thing that you can do to a room is add light. To get somebody, you can create what you want guests to see by lighting only what you want the guests to see. Now, the room doesn't even have to be black. It's like, we all know that there's lights in the ceiling, but no one ever looks up to see where the light's coming from or how it's reacting to it. You know that in specific venues, there's some hideous things on the walls, but you don't light them and you don't see them.
Yeah.
So it's like, it stops, but people don't know that. So like being able to like light the room correctly and spending a minimal amount of money on light, doesn't have to be huge.
Yeah.
Will give you huge impact.
It's true.
Huge
I mean,
impact.
you can do half of your design with light. It creates a vibe, it creates energy, it creates an ambiance. It adds the color to the like theme and look of the event. I think that it's a magic tool.
Even with the piece that you were talking about with safety, everybody feels so much safer when you walk into a room and the lights are really bright. It's like you don't really feel safe until you've gotten into the dining room and it's dark.
You and I were guests at an event where the lights were on full. Neither one of us planned the event. We were both guests, and the lights were on full. And you and I found each other, and we're like, "Are we supposed
Did they
to
leave the work?
Are we supposed to be here yet?" And like it was that like awkward feeling.
Well, and there wasn't music.
Startle.
There wasn't background music.
Right. There
either.
was nothing that felt like it was an event in motion. It was like a brightly lit workroom, and I was like, "Are we supposed to be here, Kurt?" You're like, "I don't know. I'm wondering the same
Are we
thing."
half an hour early?
I know. It's true.
Right? But you know what? This is really cool because think about the event that's coming up and what we're doing.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do to those people.
Yeah.
Can I tell them?
Yeah.
So this is great. We're going to do an event where everything is white. Or if it's not white, it's the color that it naturally is. And you're going to walk up from the first experience and go to the dining experience. And you're going to walk into the room and it's going to be jarring.
Startling. Yes.
Because you don't know that the room, why is it so bright? Why is it so white? Why is it so not lit correctly? And then the minute everybody sits down, it goes into like the color and the experience. And it's just overwhelming. So there you get your first gasp. And it'll be very jarring for people. It'll make people feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it'll only be for a few minutes. And then it'll be like, this is cool. And that's what we want. We want, this is cool. And we want people to like walk away from it. And we want them to go, oh, you're not going to believe what happened last night at this event. That's what you want.
I think it's interesting because the budget conversation in the nonprofit world, so often I think folks think of designers and they think of weddings. And I think people spend a lot of money when it comes to like big, huge floral components and, you know, each moment having its own aesthetic piece of the puzzle. And so often I looked to some things, and you actually have taught me a lot about, like, sometimes it's really simple solutions that make the bigger moment, that make the gasp, that make the wow. You and I were working on an event for Basic Rights Oregon. And we wanted to transform this big, huge ballroom into a space that got everyone's attention and brought everyone's focus into the center of the room where our stage was and where our fundraising was taking place. But it was an event where we really wanted to celebrate. I mean, we're working on social justice issues around LGBTQ rights. We wanted to really be in celebration and celebrate joy as a form of activism. And you brought ribbons into the room and simply brought ribbons from the centerpiece all the way up into the ceiling and created this like crisscross effect. But from the like outside perspective, the entire like from table to ceiling was full of big, bright, beautiful color and streamers. And it focused the eye on the middle of the stage. And it was the simplest thing. It took one person with a lift a couple of hours to drop some streamers. It didn't cost us very much to do. And it's still to this day, I mean, 15 years later, is one of the prettiest events I think we've ever produced.
Cool.
It's just like has a wow look to it.
Well, it also told a story about connectivity.
Yeah.
You know, and that interconnectedness and that web and pulling everybody together and having them feel connected in that way.
Yeah.
And a really, I don't want to say easy, but I think simple is probably simple and elegant.
And still created that gasp moment. Yeah. And when you lit them and had like the room shifted to dance party and you lit them and the lights started moving and it felt like the whole room was alive. So simple ideas around impact.
But that's a perfect example, not to interrupt, but it's like, well, it's like top of my head. It's like, that's 500 people walking into a room with 450 people. Freaking ignore the tabletop because no one's ever going to see it.
Yeah.
No. It's like focus on right here in the middle of the room, like 6 to 20 feet. That's where visually everything's going to happen at that point.
Yeah.
For those guests, for that experience in that scenario. But I don't think a lot of people think that way, and I don't think a lot of people see that way. It's like, hire a colorist. hire one person to help you with that one thing. Even if this is a perfect example. A client called me yesterday, and she's like, hey, I've got this thing out of town, Superman event. Give me 15 ideas right now for Superman. It's like, okay, here. Bam, 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 bam. And it's not like it came off Google. It just came off 27 years of doing stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, and that doesn't cost her a lot of money. I definitely sent her a bill for it, but it was like, that's where good money is being well spent.
Yeah. Having the expertise and the experience.
Yeah. Even like venues that like offer design services for floor plans. Let them do it.
Yeah.
They know their venue better than anybody else. True. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I've done so many floor plans in my lifetime, and yet when the venue comes in and does the floor plan, I know I'm not going to be creating catering congestion. I'm not going to be creating a flow issue. I'm not going to be accidentally. Yes. I mean, there's so much benefit of leaning on the expertise.
Well, and I think what you just said about a floor plan and all that's contained in a floor plan, I think that's news to some folks listening right now. One, that there is a floor plan.
Right.
No, and I don't mean that. I don't mean that in a demeaning way, but these are the technical pieces of the event design that they don't have time or capacity to do. They don't run a hotel ballroom. But floor plan informs everything. And it is actually how all of your vendors talk to each other and have a common language to be able to come and execute this piece for you. So you in PowerPoint dropping rounds into a room, not knowing.
Not to scale,
not knowing what spacing needs to be and how all that impacts becomes critical. And so I think back to the question of where to spend money for impact, it is how do we spend it in the room for like visual impact or experiential impact, but it is also about how do we spend money during planning for some of those core pieces that makes things executable in terms of what's happening in the room.
And that the fire marshal is not going to shut you down.
Yeah,
so plates can get out.
If you take nothing away today, please do not do your own floor plan.
Yeah. In PowerPoint.
That's
the word. I mean, I had an organization present to me. I know. I had an organization present to me an idea once that they said, yeah, we think we could do that in this room. I'm like, wait, this is a room that fits like 300 people and you're trying to fit 600 people in this room. And they said, oh yeah, they said that we can do 700. I'm like, standing. You can do 700 standing. And they said, but we laid it out on a PowerPoint. And I'm like, these tables are for children. They're not they're not to scale. And they hadn't actually understood that the measurement of the space and the scale of the table and the scale of the chair at the fire marshal bandwidth you need created an impact. And they had to completely, in fact, they actually moved venues because they couldn't do what they were trying to do and achieve what they wanted.
You're actually doing more damage than you are doing good, because just creating something for the sake of creating something doesn't really touch base on the actual, like, the measurement of the room based on, and all the furniture that's going inside of it and all the other little pieces that go inside. That's what it's about. How does it fit? How does it move? How does it flow?
And when it doesn't fit,
if you don't have that,
yeah.
Right? And we've all been off by a foot.
Oh, gosh.
You know, it's like you think a foot doesn't matter. A foot matters.
Yes, it does.
You know, I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but it's like we've had floor plans that were not to scale by a foot, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, we can't get that row of tables in here.
Yeah.
Because of fire marshal code.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or
it's blocking a door.
Yeah.
And we don't have 4 feet.
Or the seats just don't fit.
Right.
And then, so we could put the table there, but the people can't be there.
Yeah.
Little things.
Well, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to dive more into event design choices for your gala event. So we'll be right back.
Ready to take your fundraising to the next level? Need to get unstuck in your event planning? Now's your chance to connect directly with the experts behind the Fundraising Elevator. Book a one-on-one consulting session with Sam for strategic planning and fundraising strategy, with Kristen for your program and storytelling, or Mary for your registration and data tools. They're here to provide you personalized answers to all your event questions. Don't wait. Raise more at your next fundraising event. Book your session today at elevatenonprofit.com. You can also find the link in the show notes.
Welcome back to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. We're talking about fundraising events and what design can do for events. And we were just talking about the fact that nonprofit leaders, nonprofit development directors, executive directors often are producing 1, maybe 2 events a year.
If
typically,
they're lucky.
Typically, those 2 are very different. You know, like a walk and a gala or something.
Very different events.
But the idea of having an expert come and support you and help you to make sure that the one event you're producing a year is awesome and is amazing. I think design informs so much. And we talked about the idea of starting your event from the question of what are you trying to achieve? What's the purpose of the gathering? One of the ways that we've seen purpose really infused in events is by focusing on the mission. Like, how are we telling the story of the mission? How are we connecting people deeper to what the nonprofit does, right? Like, we can have a casino theme, but we're trying to feed people. How do we connect those dots? Oftentimes, the easiest way to connect the dots is focus on what the mission story is, less about something that feels disconnected from mission. So I'm curious about events that you've worked on, designs you've done, where you have seen mission show up in event design, or where you've seen experiences and design choices where the purpose, the mission, the story of the organization is showing up in the event.
Okay, the biggest one, I'll never forget it as long as I live. Well, there's 2.
See, because it's memorable when you include it. Go ahead.
What? Wait, say it again?
It becomes memorable when you include the story of your mission tied into the design choices. It becomes memorable. It's not just another event.
Absolutely. Oregon Tradeswoman. Was that you?
We've worked with them. Yeah, they're fantastic.
When they came to us, they were. I didn't even know what they did. You know, it was like, okay, first Google your client.
Right. So, learn more about what they do.
If you're a vendor, Google your client, know what they do. What are they trying to accomplish? And it was very clear that they were trying to. It was more of a friend raiser and a congratulatory. They're eventually going to raise money, but it wasn't their. They were not trying to hit a number that was not realistic. They really wanted to like touch base with everybody in their industry within the room and connect everybody.
Yeah.
And really kind of do a little friend raiser kind of thing. And so when they were talking about that, it was like, oh, okay. So this is all women in blue collar.
Yeah.
And
trades.
So what we did was we ended up like, I said, let's video map the room. We were at a space where you could video map the room. And we're going to take people out of the audience and put them 14 feet in their uniform.
I didn't produce this event and I did not attend this event, but I have heard stories about this event because that was so impactful.
Doo-doo.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. We like got all the pieces and they kind of came up when they started to do the presentation, the program, that's when they started coming up. And they're coming up like in groups. And people were freaking out because it was them sitting in the audience on screen.
Yeah.
That's
popping
amazing.
up.
So I want to touch on all the things you just said. So video mapping is where you're taking an entire wall surface and projecting on it, not just like a screen space, but the entire wall. So you took like life-size images.
Bigger than life size, like 25-foot images of some of the people sitting in the room at the tables and put them in their uniforms, in their work, in a kind of like superhero stance up surrounding the audience. So now all of a sudden, instead of white walls or blank walls, we now have walls of all these faces looking back at us that are actually part of the group who you're trying to connect everyone to. Exactly.
Yeah.
So there was every industry that was in the room on the wall.
Amazing.
So one person representing. And I think that there was 25 images and it kind of went through it all. But the excitement, we almost had to stop the program because they were so into like who was going to show up next and what they do. And even the explanation of like, I didn't know that this person or what they did, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it sparked a conversation. Hey,
that's me.
Right?
Yeah.
It brought in the entire group. There was the energy in the room exploded. And I think that it did what they were trying to do. And then when they finally got to like raising the money, it really did. There was more money on the table.
Yeah.
Well, it did this amazing thing. People actually saw themselves literally
a part of
both a part of the event, but in the mission of the organization. And to me, the best events collapse the distance between the organization, its mission. The stage is the sort of literal embodiment of that in the room. They collapse the distance between that and the person who's sitting in a seat watching.
Yeah.
And when you eliminate that distance and that the person is no longer watching, they're activated.
Right.
And participating, that is a completely different experience of a room.
Completely different. Okay, so now I think it's really important, especially for your audience, to take that to the next level. Go, how much did that cost?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, that was all custom content.
Yep.
And we had to film it, and we had to bring the pictures, and we had to take the shots, and we had to and it was about, $9,000. And I think a lot of people would gasp at the fact that we spent $9,000 doing that. But in the big picture,
it achieved what they were trying to achieve.
Not only did it achieve what they're trying to do, they probably raised $40,000 over what their goal was because people were engaged, people were activated, people were excited about it, people understood what was going on. There was this movement in the room that doesn't happen a lot of times, and it doesn't get that ball rolling.
Well, and I think folks, when they're looking at expenses on their budget, don't always understand the potential of line items in exactly that, in creating a movement in the room, in raising money. I think often folks are like, okay, I'm going to spend $9,000 on an auctioneer who's going to come in and raise money theoretically. but can't see logic in spending that and creating the whole experience in the room and literally galvanizing your room, connecting them together and having them all lean in and lean forward together as a community. That is not something that your one auctioneer on stage can do in the same way.
No, agreed.
And so I think often design and those pieces, people have been programmed to see them not as places to spend some money. We're not advocating spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, but lighting, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but lighting has become really affordable. And the technology is advanced in such a way that we're not always talking about folks up on cherry pickers in the ceiling hanging lights from truss. That's a very antiquated way of doing all of the lighting. We're talking about battery operated LED lights around the perimeter that you can custom colors to, that you can throw design up on the wall. Like, technology has come a long way with regard to design. Even if we had talked about what you did for $9,000 in that moment 5-8 years ago, the price point would not have been $9,000.
No, it would not have
right?
been $9,000.
So I think it's constantly accelerating and changing and becoming more affordable, and entry points for some of that technology are becoming affordable. And so I just want folks to really kind of start to broaden their perspective about the expense and really get into what do we need it to do. And that is a perfect example of clarity about what that moment could do for the room and who was there.
And it is a risk. I mean, you are, as a nonprofit, taking a risk that it doesn't work and that you're spending $9,000 on something that is a little bit out there. But if you have a great person who's actually got experience underneath the belt, they're not going to lead you down a trail that it's like, is not going to give you a result.
Right.
If you've got somebody you trust that's going to create a result and they're saying, I own this, I've got it, this is going to be cool.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
You, I have two stories that come to mind, but you taught us a long time ago. In fact, Tanya Mickelson, who is on the show, repeats this often, that having one particular element, focusing your costs on one element that creates the wow, creates the gasp moment, and really helps to move the mission forward can be some of your best spent money. And she often looks for how does she create the one focal point to make sure that if we're on stage telling stories that they have a great look and a great aesthetic and a great stage. If we're bringing a look into the room from a graphic element, how do we do that in a way that gives texture to the room? That sometimes it's not a huge expense. And sometimes I think there's a balance of if you spend too much money, is the fundraising now moot because you spent too much? As a guest, I walk into an event and I have 2 frames often. Wow, they didn't spend any money on this event. This is a bummer of an event. Or I walk in and I go, ooh, they spent way too much money on this event. Chair covers, no one needs chair covers. Rarely. I've never seen an event where chair covers made
Not in the last 15 years.
Yeah, made a difference.
Very nice. We're heading into 1990s design territory.
And
I
yet,
think
that's something that people will spend a ton of money on, and it's just lost.
They will?
Oh yeah.
To this day?
No, maybe not to this day, but in some areas, yeah, maybe in some places. And it just doesn't have the same impact. But you did an event with us that's still to this day one that we talk about all the time, the soup and spoon event.
Yeah.
So we work with an organization that's a furniture bank. And you attended their event a long time ago. And one of the elements of their event was that as a furniture bank, they get household goods donated all the time. And they're repurposing those household goods for their event and creating little lounge areas and tabletops. And there was no cohesion to it. And it actually took those household items out of use for the household because now they're being used for the event. And it kind of was in collision with their mission. And you said, they operate out of a warehouse. They have warehouse in their name. Let's move this event into a warehouse. And once we give a really cohesive look, let's look for ways that we can help people to understand the difference between bare and full, house versus home, filling up the household goods in the home. And we made a couple of key choices. And one of them was that warehouse had 2 loading bays. And we pulled up 2 trucks that had their branding all over the trucks.
That's right. Yeah.
And one truck was Bear. And then the guests got to go through the shopping experience that they do on an iPad at the furniture bank. And then they got to go into the truck that was completely decked out and looked like a home and see where all the donated goods came from and how it totally converted the space. So like a really simple choice. It actually didn't cost anything, but it just like elevated the experience. That same event we did to this day, this mission-based piece that I talk about all the time. We served soup with no spoons. Do you remember this?
I do.
Yeah. So the organization's number one.
I had to execute that.
Right.
The number one request that this organization has is silverware. And we're like, oh, such a simple thing that we overlook often from our place of privilege, that we don't understand that having silverware is the difference between being able to sit down and enjoy your meal comfortably. So we started the dinner by serving soup with no silverware. And the opening to the program was, hello, welcome. Do you see something missing? As everyone's like looking under their like bowl, looking to try to find their spoon. And then we brought the silverware out. The wait staff were like the superheroes in that moment because they brought baskets of silverware. And we explained that all the silverware being used tonight was going to be washed and donated to the furniture bank. So really simple ways that you could clearly see like what you're designing right now is actually in juxtaposition to your mission. And then we brought it right into the room and made it experiential for the audience. That was one of my favorite events because it's so
long ago.
It was so long ago, but we easily connected mission.
Yeah. I'm wondering so I think part of planning and design is that we know what's behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. So when we're doing sometimes. So when we're doing pieces like that, we're anticipating a response, or we know sort of the mechanics of it. Can you think of an event you guested at where some of that design worked on you in that way?
Worked on me?
Yeah, like that you were like, oh, that's good.
Yeah. Oh my God. Pica? Mm-hmm. Okay, in Pica, the old days.
So this is the Portland Institute of Contemporary Art, and they hold a Dada ball, which is like an absurdist sort of theme, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Contemporary art.
They had fortune cookies hanging off of nylon strings the entire ceiling was covered 8 feet above your head. So it was, it was just beautiful.
An art installation.
It was an art installation. And then Lady Godiva came flying across the room naked on a horse on a zip line through the dinner afterwards. It's just, that was enough to go,
boom.
Yeah. What? Anything that's that off the wall, impactful, crazy, experiential,
and totally mission aligned,
and so mission driven is
that's the best part.
Yeah, right.
All connected.
Mission driven. I'll keep talking about them. Then you went outside, and there was Pong on the side of a building that you could walk up and play Pong.
Oh, like that video game, the old like Atari.
Yeah. But it was 45 feet high,
amazing.
45 feet wide. That was very impactful. Another year they had tables pushed together, and there was someone's head sticking out of the top of the table who was dressed in costume. And I got to be a head one year. And
did you talk to all the guests?
You could be so mean to them because they didn't know who you were. They wanted to know who you were. They wanted to feed you, give you. It was so interactive, but yet it was a piece of absurdist art.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's just a couple of them.
Well, I think what that does though is it immerses people in your mission and in your story. We talk all the time about how Make-A-Wish does a really beautiful job of immersing people in mission. I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary about Bat Boy.
Bat Boy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's such a great example where, that's like the whole city of San Francisco came out to help this little boy's wish come true, being Batman. And everyone was, in need and had an emergency and cheered on Batman.
But it was clarity of mission.
Yeah, it was so clear. It was such an experience that I think that can translate into the ballroom, especially like Dada Ball, where you have a very clear theme that ties to your mission. Sometimes I see theme as divergent, right? Like people go, we need Mardi Gras, but it has no tie back to their mission. How much does theme inform you around design choice? And do you get in with the nonprofit and steer themes or help with sort of theme choices?
It's a good question. I think theme can be, it depends on the organization. It depends on if it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes theme is not a good idea.
Right.
But what comes to mind is the Portland Art Museum.
Uh-huh.
It's like no matter when when we're working on an event at the Portland Art Museum, you can't even begin the process. They just think like differently, like I do. I think
They're artists, yeah.
really cool. So you get to the first thing you do is you get the book of what the show is, that you're connecting the show to the event.
Yeah.
Really important.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then you get to see the entire museum in a tiny little scale of every wall color of what the wall colors are going to be painted with the painting on the wall, in miniature. And you get to see the entire exhibit in a very small version.
And then at the end so when an art museum opens a new exhibit like that and has a special exhibit or a show, you're creating events with them that are the celebration of the opening of that exhibit. So the guest is experiencing both the celebration and the exhibit at the same time, right?
Right, exactly. So it's got to be mission driven. It's got to be that specific event driven. And then it has to reflect into the event. You can't just go willy-nilly off like, and now we're doing this. It just doesn't really work. And then you meet with the curator, who also has their own vision, which you never get.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It would be like, I always thought it's like if nonprofits were more like that, it was like with you, the actual person was like, who's affected by it.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like, I want to talk to the person that's affected by it.
Yeah.
It's like, what should we do? What do you think we should do? It's like that kind of information as opposed to a committee.
Yeah.
Makes more sense. So it's like, then you have the conversation with the curator. And I mean, there was one show where it was like, I didn't get it until I sat down with her. And she's like, oh, no. This show's all about light. It's got to be about light. It's not about that. It's not about this. It's about light in this perspective. It was like, and then once we got that, it was like, oh, and then the color palette's already drawn out for you. It's like, pull that all that in. And now go crazy. And then some of the imagery, just like a nonprofit, it's like if we're talking about people, you're going to put people's pictures up on the screen. It's like we need to take the art and recreate some of the art into the experience.
Yeah.
And so they like it best when something gets tweaked and shifted.
And feels different.
Yeah, it feels different. It's like it can be playful and fun. This is serious, but now it's playful and fun. I think that also is very impactful in the nonprofit way.
Yeah.
It's like there's always time for seriousness, but to some extent, it is an event. It needs to be playful and fun. There's not to go tangential, but it's like there's a couple of organizations that do not serve alcohol, and I always think, yeah. You're still trying to raise money, kids. It's like, you got to have some booze.
Let's talk about that because you and I have worked a lot on events like that where we've tried to identify, understandably, there's a lot of organizations that work around addiction and don't want to serve alcohol. You and I have looked at a lot of service models to be able to change how alcohol is served. And so one of the things that we've adopted is sort of like a best practice around our bar service, that we always offer a mocktail that is not booze filled, that we always have non-alcoholic beverages readily available where people don't have to wait in line. And when we're passing a tray of wine, we always also have bubbly water on it. And a lot of people don't drink, and that has become a universal on events now. And then if we know that we have an audience where they're dealing with addiction and recovery, we also make certain that in the same way a lot of galas will make the wine readily available on a table, we make sure that the coffee is readily available on the table so that there's a service model that says we're thinking about making sure everyone feels safe and welcome and included. And I love that example because we've worked with other catering teams and other catering partners where the booze is free flowing, and it makes a difference when you can accommodate everyone in the room versus just some of your audience members.
And on the flip side, I've had those kind of organizations where they're like, we're absolutely not serving any booze. It's like, you're absolutely throwing $20,000 into the toilet.
Right.
Because if the people that do want the alcohol are also donors, it's like they have to have an experience. Here's just to then take that one step even further. Yeah. So you're having that experience. It's like I'm having that experience as this person like who designs events and has experienced a lot of events and stuff. You get all the way to that first sip of wine and you take a sip and it's the worst thing you've ever tasted in your entire life. It changes the meal.
It does.
It changes it changes the experience. It changes.
But it was free.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If we were using every single thing that was free, you would walk in and go, oh, everything was free, because you would see it.
There was actually an interesting test that was done on invitations. A marketing firm did a test for a nonprofit where they sent 3 different invitations out. One invitation was like cut and done in their office, like not totally straight, but printed on the printer in the office. One invitation was sent out to print, was a nice folded invitation in an envelope. And then one invitation was like die cut with confetti that came out and, bells and whistles.
A band started playing in the corner.
And the result that they had was the cut in the office. People were like, are you okay? Is the organization going to be open tomorrow? They got calls of concern. From the audience who got the folded printed invitation, they got RSVPs. And from the audience that got the bells and whistles and die cut and glitter, they got calls saying, why are you spending my money this way? So the impact of something really professionally done, but simple, can go a long way. And I think that that's true when it comes to the food service, the design, the decor. Well, it creates an experience.
But also, I think the experience, you allow people to continue when you don't give them speed bumps, right?
Right.
So you take a sip of really not great wine, people all of a sudden are like, oh my God, I'm drinking horrible wine. Whereas if you'd given them middle of the road, like not offensive, but not $800 a bottle wine, they maybe don't notice it. And that's okay, right? You serve them food that's good, that they don't go, oh my God, this is terrible. Or why are they serving me 12 plates of, right? Like there is something to that zone where people are noticing but not noticing. And I think about that sometimes with experiences in rooms where you can give them that impact, but we as people can't sustain shock and awe for 2 hours. We can't do it, right? So you can't have this gasp moment followed by a gasp moment.
You can't. There's a line.
But it also dilutes the impact of your gasp moment, right?
Yes.
So it's like, how do we design so that people have those blips and energetically we're doing these things, but also we want a lot of things to just be happening that create, that they're not looking at stark walls, that you did start with that room and you are lighting the things I want to look at, but I don't know you're doing that, right? You want to work on me in that way so that my energy is going where you want it to go. And I think sometimes event design and the program, what's happening on stage, the perfect mix of that is how you can create that lean in and channel that energy toward your mission, toward your fundraising, that it's not getting dissipated out over bar lines because you put it in the wrong place or all of those things. They all come together. And I think sometimes because it's quiet, people don't know it's happening. And specifically, I don't know that our nonprofit friends always know that that's happening. And so our job is to make it happen, right? So that it feels easy. People show up, there's signage, they're getting greeted, they're getting directed, they're getting handed a non-alcoholic or alcoholic beverage based on preference. Like all of those things are happening so that their energy can conserve in a lot of ways so that when we need it, we can do the thing that turns it on.
Absolutely. And it's like, it would be hard to be a designer with not knowing what the timeline was or the run of show.
Right.
To like know when the walls should spin psychedelically and when they should not spin psychedelically.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like,
please don't spin the walls while I'm eating dinner.
No, but and then know when those points are that something should happen. And you're right. It's like you do not want to just keep slapping people in the face. It's like that's not going to do what you want it to do.
No.
But you do want a little boof here and a little boof there and a little boof there, just enough to go, that was cool.
Yeah. There's a right amount and a wrong amount.
There is a wrong amount and there is a right amount. wow. And we could talk about that for days on end.
Is guest attire, designing, theme, people like dress? Can you talk about guest attire and design and how that comes together? I'm thinking specifically, we've worked on events together where it's been a color as a theme, like black and white is a very specific, you're here in your black and white striped shirt. What does that do to the environment at an event when you give guests something to aim
Dress
toward,
to.
dress to?
Absolutely have to know your audience. You absolutely have to have huge conversations with the client, who also needs to understand their audience. If they don't understand their audience, this is never going to work. It's such a dangerous territory to let go. We're doing this, but when it works, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Children's cancer, years ago, I met with them, and this is when I was like really new, and I didn't even understand children's cancer. They were like, "Hey, we're going to do a superheroes theme." I was like, "No, they don't do it. And nobody's going to dress up like that." It's like, "They will." It's like, "I don't think they will." It's like, "No, they will." They're completely invested. Those people are completely invested in their mission. They're completely invested in those children. They all showed up in costume, and I was like, I didn't think this would work in a million years, but they were so into it. Other organizations, usually deep pocket organizations, do not make me participate. I do not want to participate. I just want to experience.
Yeah.
I will dress up in the appropriate attire. If you're going to say something like black tie in Oregon.
Yeah.
There's only 2 organizations that I can think of that people are even that even own black tie.
Yeah.
Where they're going to do it.
They're going to come in their fancy fleece.
Yeah.
Right.
But also, I think what you bring up about knowing your audience to me is pretty critical, because it's that you understand what barriers to participation
Absolutely
look like or don't look like. Me, as the introvert that you've barely gotten there to talk to people and be out for the evening, if you give me a black and white theme, that's a much lower barrier to entry, right? I'm like, great, I can put on my white shirt and my black jacket and I'm good, right?
Call on me. Call on me. We did an event for an architectural firm, and she was like, "What are we going to do?" It's like, "We're doing the whole thing black and white. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be sequins, black, white, all these Christmas trees and snowy trees." And I said, "The only way we're going to get the best photograph," because they take this yearly photograph. I said, "Everybody has to dress in black and white, and it can be tails to tennis shoes." So it's like you can do
whatever you have in your closet.
Range here. It just has to be black or white. And that she was like, "Are you sure this is going to work?" I said, if we give them that leeway, so that they can wear white jeans and white tennis shoes and a t-shirt, because you've got that group that's under 30, that's how they want to dress. It's like, or I know the older people they own tuxes and tails. They're going to come out, come in that. Yeah. And if it's just the water needs to reach will reach the same level. You know what I mean? So it can't be over here and it can't be down here. The event needs to be here in the middle too, if you're going to do those 2 extremes. And I said, okay, I'm telling you right now, all the fun, crazy people are going to show up in white. And all the other people that are like introverted, subdued, don't want to really participate are going to show up in black. You should have seen the outfits. The white people had lights and ribbons and hats, and they were just in the craziest, coolest outfits. And the people that were dressed in black were you couldn't even see them in the room. They just didn't even want to participate. But they did get the theme.
That's the point of dressing in all black.
Exactly.
They did participate.
They did participate.
They got participation points.
And we didn't say like, you have to.
Right.
We just said, here's what we're thinking about doing. And it was just such a great middle of the road combination for that group of people. Yeah. But that was also a big conversation with the CEO of the company, the executive director, all these different people. It was like, do you think these people will participate? Because we're not going to do it if they don't participate.
I personally prefer a color as an attire choice than a like formal, semi-formal, business casual, business formal, because then I have to like go Google, how do I fit in and participate at this event, right? But if you give me a color choice and I can get away with the outfit I feel most comfortable in, but it fits within the scheme, that is like my preferred. I love that because it gives me an easier access point. We have done events with LGBTQ organizations, and the rainbow is the like theme for so many LGBTQ organizations. And we had one who each year picked a different stripe of the rainbow. So that year they were just going to have all red.
This is the response. Kurt's over here sighing and not like shaking his head. I'm like, that's kind of cool.
Well, they had a year. They had a year that was.
We have to do the rainbow again.
Well, they had a year that was the red dress ball. They had a year that was the indigo ball. They had a year that was the they had I can't remember what the purple was, but every year people came in the full, like you said, tennis shoes to tails. They came in the full gamut. Some folks were like over the top ball gowns, and other people were in their like jeans and t-shirt, as long as it fit within the color code that people felt like they could still be a part of it.
I'm totally with you. It's a little bit like having a Halloween party.
Yeah.
Some people are going to go, insane and spend weeks and months and years putting this costume together.
Yeah.
And other people are going to come as a carton of milk. Right?
Or the packet that you just can like slip on out of the package.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's funny. That's a big conversation. We can talk about this until we're blue in the face.
True.
Yeah. It can be a point of access and cohesion. It can also be a barrier. So I think your point I want to pull forward again about the organization knowing the attendees, the guests, and how they guest and what they're looking for. And will they lean into this, or is this going to be, because if you don't have folks in the room, specifically at your fundraising gala, you don't have wallets in the room. So you don't want to alienate people by what you're doing with design. How do you make all of those pieces to come together?
Right. Two other things before I forget. Hints don't work.
Oh, good point.
Yes.
Hints
don't work. Don't hint.
No.
Just be direct. Say exactly what you want. Hints do not work. We're working on 2 events for Our House and CAP. Our House is it's a brunch. Is it Brady Bunch? It's Brady Bunch.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super fun.
That group of people,
yes,
they're all going to show up as one of the characters from It's Going to Happen. Everybody's into it. They all want to do it. On the juxtaposition, CAP, art auction, everybody knows it. Everybody wants the opportunity to like put those new pair of shoes on, put that pair of pants on they couldn't wear anywhere else. They're going to go out of their way to like make a big, their own gasp, as they walk in. So
well, and what's interesting about those 2, they're Portland-based organizations, now hand in hand with each other.
They merged together.
However, each of them had an event culture that they've developed over time.
Absolutely.
And so that is something that organizations should think about. What is our event culture? What is the expectation? When you kind of have Our House has always sort of picked a theme that people can dress to.
Right.
And CAP has always had this higher end art auction where that's what people dress to. So if you suddenly do a 180, you've taken the time and cultivation you've had of that crowd over time and the vibe of the event that you've cultivated over time as your audiences continued to change, and you've just switched it on them.
Yeah.
So I think knowing the vibe of your event and what it has been and what you want it to be and how this can be a part of that continuum is super, super important.
I think that the word that you nailed in that whole piece was culture.
Yeah.
So it's like, what is the culture of the organization? How are they going to participate?
Yep. That needs to be central for sure. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with event design.
Thank you.
Unleash the power of events to energize your donors and amplify your mission. Join us at the Elevate Conference in 2025, where you'll learn the essential tools for planning a successful fundraising event. Book your tickets now for March 12th and 13th. This dynamic hybrid conference, hosted at Avenue in Portland, Oregon, and streamed live for our virtual audience, will equip you with practical tools, demos, and templates that you can put to work immediately. Don't miss out. Secure your spot today at Elevate 2025. Visit elevatenonprofit.com to register now. Elevate Conference 2025 is brought to you by Swaim Strategies and the AV Department, powered by elevatenonprofit.com.
All right, welcome back, Kurt. We're going to ask you to step into the fundraising elevator where we're all headed up.
Okay.
And as we're headed up, what is one thing that you would recommend for a nonprofit who is diving into their event plan that would help their event take it to the next level?
I think definitely if you have the resources within your own organization, create a committee member that is creative that could help you. If not, just even outsourcing. Even if it's just the conversation about the person that I talked about earlier that just called up and said, give me 15 ideas that I wouldn't think up, I couldn't Google, you have the experience. What are they about this thing or this particular, the room or the look or the design or the floor plan or somebody that is an expertise in that area that could help you. It's just not expensive.
Yeah.
It's just not expensive.
Well, if it's an expert, if they really know the space.
They really know the space.
If they really know the type of event you're doing, an expert can give you an hour and have a much bigger impact than 20 hours of Google could have.
Or 9 hours of a committee.
Right. It's true. It's true.
For our friends in the nonprofit world, if you're here in Portland, Vibrant Table is here for your catering and venue needs. But more importantly, if you want inspiration and design ideas, start following Kurt on Instagram. It's at KSBPDX on Instagram. We want to thank you for all you do for our nonprofit friends.
Sure.
Both as a donor, a guest, and a designer. And we appreciate you being here today to share all of your wisdom.
Thanks.
Next week, we'll be talking to Chef Kiara Hardy of Kitchen Killa about how to create event menu magic. Be sure to tune in.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced in partnership with Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV Department. The program is produced and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson, Heidi Christensen, and Adam Breeden. Video production by Shannon Doran. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group. Marketing by Lisa Aragon. Support from Mary Elizabeth, Todd Campbell, John Lyles, and Andy Dowsett. And voiceover by Josh Boykin.
Friends, before we leave you, we want to ask for your help to make the podcast grow. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please follow, subscribe to the Fundraising Elevator. And if you're getting a lot out of the show, please share it with a friend and leave a review. These things help make sure that the podcast continues heading up. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Are you ready to engage supporters and grow your base with your own podcast? Then let us introduce you to our partners at the AV Department in Portland, Oregon. In addition to delivering exceptional live event audiovisual production and videography, they also have a top-tier production studio and an expert team ready to take your content ideas to the next level. Contact the AV Department to schedule a consultation and start bringing your podcast vision to life. Event planners are discovering Avenue, the Pacific Northwest's new AV-forward event venue, intentionally designed with nonprofit fundraising events in mind. From the 93-foot video production wall to the highest quality sound and lighting, premier AV features are included in every venue rental. You'll find the space and audiovisual enhancements to create your unique and memorable event. Visit avenueportland.com to schedule your personal tour.